Greetings, outcasts, freethinkers, narrative questioners, dot connectors, and genuinely open-minded and outright curious inhabitants of whatever realm we exist in at the moment. You are about to embark on another free first-hour episode of The Melt. If you find yourself wanting to dig deeper and have the desire to join the conversation during our monthly Melt meetups, you might want to consider becoming a monthly subscriber. For as little as 3 lousy Babylon hokey-pokey tokens per month, you can have access to full-length, early, and exclusive episodes. Just visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast or click the link in the episode notes to set the process in motion. It's simple, painless, and very well might make you feel tingly inside. So without further ado, please enjoy the show!
This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
I know that sometimes when we are faced with events and situations that seem out of our control, but at the same time seem to demand that some sort of action be taken, it can cause one to feel first helpless and then hopeless. And as any reality co-creator knows, we all affect our reality in intrinsic ways, but that it sometimes is hard to know in what way to go about it. Intention is very powerful, but it can seem insignificant against, say, a sky blanketed with chemtrails, climate manipulation technologies, and the ubiquitous 5G towers that we're seeing all over the place. I have also been in the place of feeling helpless and hopeless myself. And then one day I was listening to THC and Greg was interviewing a guy named Mitch the Orgone Donor. I originally downloaded the episode because his name had the word orgone in it, and I'm so glad that I did because that's when I learned about tower busting, a practice that uses devices inspired by Wilhelm Reich's research to transform the deadly orgone radiation, say, coming from a 5G tower, to positive orgone radiation. I immediately love the anarchic spirit of gifting the earth with objects that one can make by themselves that help to restore balance to the ecosystem. Well, I asked Mitch to come on The Melt, and he's here today to have a chat with us. I start off the conversation by asking Mitch what put Wilhelm Reich on his radar.
Yeah, for myself, I think it was sort of in the way someone might reverse engineer something. It was really diving into geoengineering that certain terms began crossing my radar. Everybody has their wake up moment or moments. I actually have a glitch time stamped in my brain of the day that I knew something. I'm like, I don't get to go back after this, and it opens up a floodgate, and everyone then starts researching. So, as far as coming across Reich's work, it was knowing that something was wrong. While at the same time just kind of looking around and seeing like, well, why there are all these agendas, whether it has to do with the war or it has to do with money, it has to do with some form of control. And the common thread I kept finding as I connected all these things I was learning with geoengineering was that there was an energetic component to this. And I started hearing about the term etheric, and I was looking into things like occult magic and alchemy and in a nutshell, it's just, that the reality in which we live is not what we're told. And then you learn it's like not only, Twilight Zone doesn't even scratch the surface of describing it.
Mm.
And so it began it began like this dot connecting where I'm like, okay, there's something going on a bigger level energetically, and started learning about life energy, when which I came across all the terms of like the tachyon and the chi, the prana. It was sort of, I think I actually had come across the term orgonite, which doesn't really have anything to do with Wilhelm Reich, but I came across that term first, the hockey puck, the little device we'll talk about today. And as the root word of that, of course, being orgone. And so it was sort of like working backwards, where I almost like jumped over anything that had to do with Reich. And I was just looking for like the Band-Aid to the problem I didn't quite know I was in the process of solving.
Mm.
And so coming around to the orgone, it's like, okay, well, wait, who is this guy? And of course, he's got all of the red ticker marks of anyone else in history where things happen to that person where we're like, oh, there must be a there.
Yes.
The government hated him, puts him in jail.
Exactly.
He mysteriously died. That's all. It's like, oh, we've got a trifecta. He meets criteria A, B, and C.
Absolutely.
And so it was really kind of like honing in on that, and honing in on him at the same time that I was sort of seeing my world around me crashing, where everything I thought that was just this stupid physical event, these events going on, I'm like, there's something bigger to this. There's like a thing. I didn't quite know what it was. I'd later call it a parasite or a non-human something, energetic force, but that it was pulling these strings. And I began to, like, as I was learning about money at the same time as Reich, I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm starting to understand why every decision that's ever been made in the government or in the, how our country formed and why we use currency and the connotations with money. It's like there has to be a reason why this person, who on the surface just looks like he's curing cancer here or infertility there, using these little contraptions that he made, but realizing like, oh, this is connected to consciousness. This is connected to something that's changing with us, something that may have been turned off and is being reactivated, or however people look at it there's endless ways that we all look at it, in the same and differently nowadays. But it was just this puzzle piece. All of a sudden, as I was learning about Reich, it was like I'm sitting at the table with my jigsaw puzzle, and the pieces you just start flipping them over, and you're like connecting another one here, another one there. And every time you connect one, another one would flip over and another one would be connected to that life force concept. And I'm like, well, what? Like, there has to be something really big going on right now, or however long, that has to do with like why I'm waking up, why I experience what I experience, why I feel like I'm in the Twilight Zone. And so as I dabbled in this concept of the orgonite, I had come across certain terms, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself on until you ask certain questions, I guess. But as I dived into the ultimate use for some of these tools that both Reich was using, and then what we've created today based on that work, in this case orgonite, I began seeing so many changes in the world around me, my immediate environment, and my own outlook on life was just like everything was completely shattered. I had to pick myself back up, and like I'd set out basically on this journey to prove that this stuff wasn't real, or that this didn't work, that everything was just a sham, and orgonite didn't work, and I really kind of let my ego take the lead. And I've just only ever been pleasantly surprised along the way in trying to prove that wrong. I've only acquired more information to say there's a there, and to just keep going. And that sort of spiraled down the hill in an avalanche of what would become my work, and what we call like the tower busting, the geo restoration, and what we'll talk about through the course today. So.
So when was that moment? Like, how long ago did that happen for you?
So I had, as far as timestamps, there was a timestamp. This will sound trivial to most people because it's not Orgonite related, but it was the day I used to be a bleeding heart liberal, and I campaigned for Mr. Yes We Can and all that stupid crap back in the day.
I hear you.
But I remember one day a certain terrorist who shall remain nameless, whether he was a terrorist, was launched out to sea. And I thought that had to be the dumbest goddamn thing I'd ever heard. And something wasn't adding up. And so I shuffled it aside. And then at the same time, 2012 and the Mayan calendar discussions, there were just a lot of concepts going on, I'm not really, I wouldn't call myself religious, having grown up Catholic, but not very religious at that time. But realizing there were things that were happening behind the scenes that had nothing to do with my physical body, whatever that may be. But it was then by those next 4 years up through 2015, 2020, I'd had every dream I had about this world being this idealistic place that I was going to be taken care of, and we're all going to live in unison, and the government loves you. And everything crashed. And I think it was as I was diving into, I read that book, The Creature from Jekyll Island. I wanted to learn about the money system. And that was where I started realizing, like, wow, how everything, the Federal Reserve is a physical entity, building, whatever, but the reason and justification for why we worship money became really important to me. And I realized with currency, and then I learned about maritime law and the whole idea of everything that's connected with water, just the mind games. I was just like, I was in the same way I was like inspiring myself to learn more. I was beat up and crushed and miserable and depressed. And I just knew, like, I was going to have to decide, do I want to just curl up and die, or do I want to do something? And I hate authority. I've always hated authority. I was a really good kid. I was one of the good people who kept my mouth shut, but I was a goody two shoes and thought I'd coast through life and get the house, the 2.5 children, and live happily ever after crap. But I always hated authority. And then I just kind of realized, like, no, I will not, whether this is a prison or not, I somewhere I'm between prison and playground. But I'm like, no, I'm going to do something with this and try and find a solution. And people can see on my website, I tend to be very solution oriented, where I'm just like, I just don't even want to listen to people if they just come like bitching about something and they don't want to do something about it.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, I think it's both. I think it's all perception. So it can be a prison if you have that mindset, but it can also be a playground if you have that mindset as well. And I think the intention is for us to feel like it's a playground while we're prisoners, but we can do the inverse. We can actually make it a playground while it's a prison.
Yeah. Well, we always hear the words. So for myself, with I'm gonna I'll try and stay within my purview, because some people, I know I do certain talks. I mean, everything about what I do is connected to energy, and essentially energy and the frequency vibration is connected to everything. So by default, I would say, I think I should still be able to talk about anything, but I do try to stick with, like, for this conversation, like with tower busting, we are essentially inverting energy that has inverted something else.
Yeah.
Right.
And we are essentially, I look at the universe, or at least in the small scheme, I look at this reality we're in. I've come to this idea. I think everything has a path of either being pro-life or anti-life.
Yes.
And when and that's just the general term that has the umbrella under it. Anti-life is what I actually call artificial intelligence. That's part of that,
Right.
the AI thing.
Definitely.
It's anti-human, and anything that's truth would be pro-life, and lies and deception would be anti-life.
Right.
And I also think, like, in the case of love, people who read my website, they'll know I'm very vocal about love and light crowds, because I live in the Mecca of Sedona, Arizona, for that kind of crap.
Oh yeah.
But the reason I call it crap is because I am of the mindset, and I got this from doing this work with the frequency fence, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the purest definition of love is truth, because the truth is not always comfortable. The truth is not always kind. But the truth only ever wants the best for all that revolves around it. It is the natural essence of, in my view, the natural essence of love. And deception, in my book, is probably the worst, most evil thing that can exist within at least this realm that I know so far. And so I think the pro-life and the anti-life, I try to find with the work that I do, it goes beyond just changing the weather, because the weather is just an energetic process. It's no different than the plants that grow, whether they're organic or genetically modified. If you look around at everything that's been done to this reality to invert, it's like something wants to play God, or something wants to play, it wants to be the control mechanism for everything, but it's in such an unnaturalistic, non-organic method.
Yeah.
And we know that. And I think, we could talk for eons about all of the individual beliefs. I get on tangents all the time. But in the heart of it, I think the playground and the prison, I'll call it a hotel. We're here for a while and we'll check out.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're at the Motel 6 and sometimes you're at the Four Seasons,
Exactly.
And so it might be bed bugs or a really good buffet.
Yeah,
And
I've
so,
stayed at both.
yeah, same. And so we do what we can within that playground, or that reality. And so, I'm just trying to find a way, whether or not I'm going to leave this place when all is said and done. I want to leave it in a better condition than I found it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, my method is through georestoration. I use the term georestoration a lot, but I've come to realize, like, people, when they hear about weather modification, which we can dive into, of course, it's not just we're going to spray something in the sky, or we're going to blast something with the towers, and we're going to manipulate the rain. Or it's like, we're not just causing drought. What's really happening, and this I'm trying to circle back to with Wilhelm Reich and his work.
Mm-hmm.
After reading, I think it was Contact with Space, when he came to the conclusion that, like, deserts are not natural. I've been saying this now since I came across his work. I've said that, and I got more blunt about how I said it, and it's something that pisses off a lot of people. And I get a lot of people have no trouble emailing me to give me their opinions about my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea of it is that something natural, and in this case, like the truth, only wants the best. It only wants what's natural for everything within it. We would, in a natural world that has no manipulation and no deception, we would essentially thrive. We wouldn't just survive, we'd thrive. Everything would flow. Everything would be in balance. Everything would essentially, and not that perfect isn't the best word for it, but there would be nothing but the best of intention and the best truth for everything. And the desert concept is that by throwing off and inverting the energy of this realm in the way that's been inverted, one of those biggest key players is the weather. And that's why we're not just seeing, like, oh, drought happening here, or right now there's a lot of busy stuff, huge terms like bomb cyclones and atmospheric rivers, which I would love to we'll talk about that too. But it's that these extremities that are going on are not just simply control the weather or don't control the weather. It's we're inverting this entire realm to fit our agenda.
Exactly.
And the weather is a byproduct.
Right. So it's influencing a natural cycle as opposed to allowing nature to take its course, as it were. It's coming in and manipulating that.
Exactly. And I think, I don't want to get too far ahead as far as the individual devices, but when we talk about the tower busting and how, for anyone who's listening that hasn't heard that term, tower busting essentially means using some form of an orgonite or orgone device to put somewhere within the proximity of different EMF devices that help to create that frequency fence in the first place. And when I like to use the term frequency fence because I think that the term HARP, that most people are familiar with the term HARP,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't do justice to it. And the reason it doesn't do justice is because everyone has probably heard of the HARP facility in Alaska.
Mm-hmm.
There's a HARP facility, I forget the name in the UK, but if people ever look up Echelon,
Mm-hmm.
it's one of the largest communication hubs where everything on Earth is intercepted. Like every phone call you've ever had, anytime you talk to anybody, I'm sure even this conversation, it gets filtered through this thing called Echelon, and that's a gnarly beast of a physical building or physical landscape if you ever are curious. But we put these things around these EMF devices that are creating that frequency fence, and we're essentially changing that energy back to sort of I don't want to say we're creating our own frequency fence. What we're really doing is just restoring the natural flow of energy that was there in the first place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you start doing that, and then all of a sudden you see what we're actually seeing right now, and this is the what people are seeing is crazy weather, lots of snow, lots of rain right now, especially over the United States. This is actually georestoration. I am seeing everything I expected to see since I started doing this back in 2015 or around 2015-16. And it's people will ask me like, oh, well, if I just start busting towers, putting this stuff around, will it start raining? And it's like, no, that's not what it means. What it means is that you're helping Mother Nature to do what Mother Nature is supposed to do. And I think we've been so bastardized as far as just looking at the weather. It's been so bastardized for so long that what's happening now is sort of like a calibration of everything trying to go back to what it used to be.
Right.
And in the case with Arizona and the work I do here, I mean, my baby is the Arizona desert. And I moved here specifically to do this because Wilhelm Reich actually came to Arizona as well. And that's where he, by deductive reasoning, came to his conclusion that deserts are not natural. And I see it every day now, as we just had, I think it rained the other day for 30 hours solid, and that's unheard. I mean, half of that is unheard of at this time of year. It's typically dry, but we just had one of the wettest, two of the wettest years on record. And, I see lakes going up and water sources being restored. I see the government working triple overtime to try and cover it up, sweep it under the rug, change the laws so that certain things can't be documented by individuals who want to share things openly. And so, just looking at these agendas, I'm seeing only good things as far as the environment and everything, sort of healing, whether that's, the forest, the animals, and the water sources. So I don't want to I apologize if I'm getting a little, it's such a broad topic.
Yeah, for sure.
Where everyone expects me to just kind of talk about the weather, which I get because this all started in trying to understand geoengineering. But it is connected to us. Our thoughts and our energy are connected to the weather. You can see it in a forecast before they cast the spell, and they tell everybody exactly what to think and how bad it's going to be. Or if, I tell people all the time that they should go look at how precipitation, I mean, water is life. Look at how precipitation is basically, talked about as far as the forecast. Because they are going to always make precipitation look absolutely terrible. It's always doom and gloom. It's always negative, and it's one of the best gifts from God, in my view. So
I didn't really realize that until I heard a couple of interviews with you, and they do every time that there's any kind of weather whatsoever, like snow, rain, hurricanes. Well, hurricanes, maybe but they just make it sound like it's a big, huge pain in the ass and something to be scared of and something to watch out for and prepare for. And it's just ridiculous nonsense.
Yeah. And I think that's one reason, I like to tell people, because I'll spout off what I say based on observations I've made for several years, and I don't. I'm not as dedicated to spending as much time outside these days, just staring at the sky. I used to do a lot more blogging than I currently do, but it's because I found I can actually accomplish a lot more in my ultimate goal by not just staring at the sky. But over the years, the observations I have made and the things I still take time to look at today, don't just look at what's going on with the weather. Don't just look at the chemtrail plane. Look at look at the intention and the severity behind the agenda. You can answer more questions about what's going on if you look at who is saying what and the extent to which it's going on. Because when I first started talking about the frequency fence, and people, they thought, well, I don't have a tower around my house. There's no towers in this neighborhood. Look around at the effort that's gone into putting devices as close to your mind, body, and heart as possible. And, I would say, like, just do a search for, I think it's the latest thing I've seen now is the Amazon Halo, whatever it is that does, it's a device you don't even wear. It sits on a nightstand next to your bed, and it tracks everything about your sleep for you. And of course, it's to help you get a good night's sleep, but you are in such a concentrated bubble of this EMF soup.
Yeah.
And that EMF is creating the pathway that is tapped in. I mean, there's a reason the aura ring goes on a person's middle finger being connected to your heart meridian. And you've got the Apple Watch that's connected to your wrist, it's connected to your pulse, your heart rate, your thyroid. And it's, whenever I see this is going to sound mean, but whenever I see a fat person who's wearing an Apple Watch and they're complaining about their weight, I'm like, have you considered maybe taking that off?
Yeah.
Especially because usually the pattern is it all happened after they started wearing the watch. But people don't think about that the tower down the street it might be more intense than something, say, in your pocket, like a phone. But it's all of these devices that are being pushed, and it's under the disguise of convenience. And it's made to essentially create the gateway, which is why our internet routers are called gateways. It's the highway to hell is what I call it. And that is the pathway that whatever this energetic force is that wants to control everything, that's what it's using. And so when I say frequency fence, it's not just the towers, it's not just HARP, it's everything down to the watch on the wrist or it's why they're forcing internet now instead of using cabled internet. I know T-Mobile and Verizon are now trying to get people to have what looks like an Amazon Alexa device in their house. And it will work with the 5G towers that were all put up during the beginning of the pandemic that are now outside on every corner.
Yeah.
And, Tesla vehicles, people, they get upset at me for this one too, but a Tesla is essentially a cell tower on wheels.
Yeah,
exactly.
And so, it's just, so you look at those types of things. And this is where, when I say keeping it within my purview about the weather, well, this whole agenda and the solution to it is all connected to the energy and consciousness and connected to the push for having this technology out there. It's not just simply, AI wants to take over, and AI isn't going to be the Terminator or as depicted in those types of movies. It's just going to it's the idea of the hive mind, or the singularity, I think, is what I've heard it now being referenced as. And this is essentially a tool for breaking down that process.
Well, and you can look at the Ring doorbell device as another example of that. And it's been sold as a device that is going to keep you secure, and someone's not going to be able to steal your Amazon packages because you're now looped into the police, and there's a geofence around your house with the Ring device. But what I find so interesting is that I pretty much most of the time keep my phone on airplane mode. And if I take it somewhere, it's on airplane mode. Anything I listen to has already been downloaded. And so I feel, maybe falsely that I'm protecting myself when I go out into the world and in my car, that I'm not basically a moving tower, or I'm not connecting to moving towers. But then I go into a situation like the gym, and everyone's got their phone on, and there's Wi-Fi in the gym, and my trainer has the Apple Watch, and all these people have the Apple Watch. So I'm being bathed in EMFs by just physical location of where I am.
The fucking treadmills have Wi-Fi.
Yeah. The treadmills now have Wi-Fi.
Ridiculous.
Well, and don't forget too, the fluorescent lighting that acts as a receptor, or really as an antenna.
Yeah.
The LED light bulb, it goes into, or it connects to the Wi-Fi in any house, and will take that signal and now sends it through your own wiring system as an antenna. And while, I mean, that very much sucks, but I use that example because when people say like, well, I don't have this, I don't have that, I'm like, look at, or really they just, when people don't believe me about the push for this stuff, it's like, there's a reason incandescent light bulbs have become rare and are in many states being outlawed altogether, because it's part of that underlying agenda. And what that does for me over all these years, it's not just Amazon making devices, it's all of these different entities. And at the heart of it, when you really look at the intention and the level of severity it's going to try and get this in there, to me that answers the question, they're all in on it to some capacity. That and what that tells me is this is so much bigger than the government. This is bigger than, because the government is pretty stupid in this, like, it's simplistic form. It's dumb. Nobody who works for it understands how to do anything. But it's like, well, why does it accomplish what it accomplishes? Because it's just a hand of something you can't actually see.
A tentacle of the octopus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
exactly.
They tried to ban the incandescent light bulb, and there was so much pushback that they actually put them back into production. I remember when this happened, and there were people going into stores and actually buying cases of incandescent light bulbs to stock up on them. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing where there is some resistance, and so whoever this predator is has to kind of pump the brake a little bit on it. I think that's to placate people, where they say, see, we won, like now we can still have incandescent light bulbs, but they're still not connecting the dots.
And that actually, I'm glad you mentioned that example of, because it's great when people, we won the battle, but not the war kind of scenario. I would suggest, people who would maybe think like, oh yeah, they're still going to make them. Well, where do you get them from? We've got certain sources to purchase things. And if people remember during the beginning of March 2020, that, every mom and pop is shut down while certain companies that are huge are allowed to stay open. One of those that was allowed to stay open, I deal with it on a regular basis. It is one of the banes of my existence, but I have to get my copper for my earth pipes from somewhere. And it's called Home Depot. And you can see now this, and as far as I'm concerned, this is a personal opinion, but Home Depot is a government entity. That's
sure.
I swear it's like Walmart, Amazon, Home Depot. I'm just waiting for the day that because it heavily influences the housing market, and there's a bigger there's a bigger reason why Home Depot was one of the only places allowed to stay open without issue. And also why they followed through with completely shutting down their garden centers and not selling seeds to people, because that was apparently not essential. There's another reason why when you just walk through the lighting section, they don't have an incandescent light bulbs, and they won't. They will only have the LEDs and the ones that have the remotes, control this with your phone.
Oh my God.
But they also are pushing, go find a washer and a dryer that don't have Wi-Fi. Find a stove that doesn't have a Wi-Fi. And in the case of the doorbell, what's interesting is my parents they built a house probably within the last 5 years, and I got to kind of observe a little bit of the contractor and how they build houses now. And it was way different than the first house they built 20 years ago. The stuff they weasel in to get you to get that will just guarantee you live in an EMF bubble. And so in the case of like the Ring, yeah, they're going to tell you, oh, you can keep safe. All we got to do is keep spreading the fear porn on the TV. And of course, everybody wants to have the Ring doorbell. Plus, you've got whatever occult meaning and symbolism is behind the Ring. Plus, you've got, like I tell people all the time, unplug your router at night. You should, if you have Wi-Fi coercing through your house, you should unplug, or you should be hardwired. And a common response I get is, I can't. My doorbell or my Nest thermostat won't work without it. And I'm like, all by design. And so that's, again, it's like, so don't just look at what they're doing. You look at the intensity behind what they're doing. And that helps you sort of piece together those puzzle pieces. And then that's where I come in. Like, I'm always about dissecting these things I hear or see, whether it's in the media or from people firsthand. And then I figure out, okay, how do we break this apart? How do we kill it with fire, essentially?
Yeah. And the Nest, sorry to interrupt you, but the Nest, they can tell if you've turned your thermostat up or down a certain degree. And they're talking about ticketing people who turn it up too high in the winter or too low in the summertime.
Yeah, and that brings in the data harvesting aspect of all of this. Yeah,
it's really hard not to laugh at this stuff anymore. I otherwise I think I would cry. So yeah.
Well, let's get into the devices. How did the devices get on your radar, and what implored you to start producing them yourself?
Yeah. So in the 2014-15 portion, as I was breaking down, probably learning about maybe reptilians, and I'm just saying, I don't know whether things are real or not sometimes, but I was just learning these concepts and just dabbling in everything I could. Read my first David Icke, baby's first David Icke book. And when I came across the idea of geoengineering, and I knew something was at least wrong in the sky, I don't know why, but for some reason, one day at work, I had a lot of alone time in my job. It was a great job to have. I went on the computer and I just stupidly wrote in a Google search, "Can you stop chemtrails?" or how to stop chemtrails. And as dumb or simplistic, it's not a romantic story, but what popped up was this hockey puck looking thing that we know of as the Tower Buster. And I think you guys have a couple of the black ones there.
Yes, we do.
And so this thing, I just started reading, I'm clicking on everything I can find from what I would consider them basically the pioneers of the orgonite gifting movement for the last 2 decades. But very limited information, but just enough information to get these little pieces where I'm like, what in God's name are these people doing? They're putting a little hockey puck around a cell tower and saying that has an effect on something in the sky. And it was a bit of a stretch for me. I know right now it's kind of entertaining to see when I explain it to some people who come across I come across their radar. And I see that thought process firing in the brain, and I'm like, yeah, it's where we are told to look up. We are told, even by certain entities who are all about geoengineering and education, will tell us to look up. It's all about something going on in the sky, when this whole entire time it has more to do with something down on the ground right next to us. And so I thought that the orgonite, the tower busting, I'm like, this is dumb. There's no way this works, and I'm going to prove it. And I've always had that inclination to try and prove. If I want to prove a point, like I can get kind of butthurt if I can't. And so I set out to prove this wrong. And so I started with just kind of like with what you guys got from me. I started small, and I just thought, I was in Chicago at the time. That is an EMF soup. And so based on the limited information I was taking from this person here and that person there, I thought surely there has to be a reaction to this, just based on the concentration of this EMF bubble if I want to do this.
Mm-hmm.
So I invested in, I wasn't making it myself at the time, but I invested in some that I found that, according to these people I found, they said, this is properly made. Because we'll also talk about this later, but like there's orgonite and then there's what we call orgonaut, and that's when it's not made right.
Mm.
But they were telling me like, yes, this is made properly. This has the proper size of the metal components that are inside. This has the right mixture and the ratios of all these elements that are in there. And so I was like, okay, I dropped some money on a bunch of it, and I thought, okay, it showed up in the mail. And within that first day, I just remember, it came at night or whatever when I got off work. The next morning when I was getting ready for work, and I thought, I've got all this stuff now, we'll figure it out this weekend. And as I was getting ready for work, I looked out one of my windows in the living room, and I noticed these really white puffy clouds in the sky. And I thought, well, for me, it was weird because it's one of those things where you don't know you haven't seen something in a really long time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're just like, oh, that's right. Like, I haven't heard from them in several years, or I
Yeah.
haven't seen one of those in a really long time. And I was just so used to, I think, seeing like a lifeless, what we call the white lifeless stuff in the sky. We call it DOR. It means deadly orgone radiation, and that's a Reich term. But I just saw this white stuff in the sky for so long that seeing one of those cauliflower-shaped clouds was like so prominent, and I was just sort of taken back. And I thought to myself, there's no way, like just having this, I'm like, I haven't even done anything with it. It's just sitting here. So there's no way. And so I go to work and whatever and come back home, and I'm thinking, I was carrying this stuff around with me. I remember some things people had said to be on the lookout for. One of them said human interaction. And when you live in Chicago and you take public transit, you have a lot of human interaction.
Mm-hmm.
And it was this weird pep in my step that I thought was bizarre, that the interactions I was having with people on my normal train route, I just thought, wow, everybody's in a really good mood today. This is odd.
Mm-hmm.
And I worked down in the loop, and when I went to work, I had looked out my window, and I noticed those same puffy clouds all day. So it was like, you can't help but wonder, and it's like when you just know something's wrong and you don't say anything about it. Well, this was like the opposite. It was like, if everything, I feel really good, and I'm seeing this thing in the sky. Someone said to be on the lookout for this,
Mm-hmm.
but obviously this isn't enough to go on. So when I got home, my significant other and I told him about it, and he was like, I actually had just bought some of this too, and I didn't tell you. And I thought, well, now that was kind of weird. And he had bought some that we both actually had bought some that was in fact orgonaut, but we had both bought some that was well made. And so we decided the best thing we can do is follow these instructions and there were enough people talking about it at the time that we knew, like, okay, put it around towers. Okay. So we just kind of mapped out. We were like, well, we ride our bikes all the time, and we kind of knew where a lot of these different towers were, and we thought, okay, they say start in your neighborhood. So we started in our neighborhood, and we went to a couple of schools and I think a post office, just whatever towers we knew, just the generic cell tower, and maybe like a radio station. And over the course of an evening, maybe like 3 or 4 hours riding bicycles, putting this stuff around. And, you put like 1 or 2 of them around the tower somewhere. Now I have come to the conclusion, I say it should be within a city block. And the further you get away, then the more you want to use around whatever the tower is, if you're beyond that first city block.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we just started putting this stuff around probably about 5 or 10, somewhere between like 5 and 10 towers. And it was just like over the next few days, there were just these weird things happening with the weather. Like it was incredibly windy. And, we were always being told that there was global warming, and people generally, the mindset was always set on global warming. It's hotter now because of humans. And so in the back of your mind, you're like, it should be warmer now. And it's like, well, it seems awfully cool. And then, and the air got drier as well. Well, I was learning at the same time that as you bust towers are the reason for humidity. The moisture is just trapped to the ionized sky.
Right.
And so you release that moisture when you start busting towers, which I didn't know at the time. It was just like, I'm just noticing weird things in the sky. I noticed an increase in the number of chemtrails, the lines I saw, but that the sky was blue and there were all these puffy clouds. So I thought, okay, still not convinced, but I'm like, this is just weird what we're seeing. So I bought some more. And the cycle repeated where it was like over the course of maybe like a month or two, we would get on our bikes and we would go out, and then we started doing it on the weekends, putting this stuff around, and all of a sudden, 10 towers became 20, and then became something around like 50. And as we were doing that, the collective temperature in Chicago started dropping for that time of year. And I thought, well, now this is interesting because the people I'm listening to who talk about this said one of the first things to go is the extreme temperatures or abnormal heat temperatures, and which I've only ever seen the consistency even here in the desert. We actually had one of the coolest summers here on record. And so it was like over time, I was basically just like, I'm not convinced, but I'm convinced enough to keep going with this. And eventually over the course of time, I got to the point where this can get very expensive very quickly if you're not making it yourself. And that's why later on, like, I started teaching people to do it. But I would spend my weeks just making this stuff throughout the week. We would load up our bicycles, we'd get on the train, we'd ride out, whatever. And all of a sudden, next thing I knew, we were gifting orgonite all along Lake Michigan, along the coastline down to Evanston and around, and like renting a car and going around the lake over to like Gary and Hammond, Indiana. We were working our way out to O'Hare and Midway airports, and we were just like working in the loop. That's a lot larger than it sounds, but it's like I would just go on 2-hour lunch breaks because I had the job of a lifetime with my own, was my own boss, I guess. So I'd go out for 2 hours at a time every day, and I just find more in downtown Chicago to gift. And as all of this was happening, so we were doing it quickly, and all of a sudden it's like our precipitation increased, and I noticed one of the early signs was that all of these storms that would always pass over us and go into Lake Michigan, and like we'd never get a drop of water, it was always dropping on us now. And I used to think what they were doing was essentially holding that moisture as long as possible, and then dropping it on the lake where it's not needed. So nobody has any benefit from it, except for Nestle, of course. But the storms eventually started falling more and more. And then somewhere in there, I started paying more attention to the forecast. And what I noticed was there was a consistency in the more that we busted or the more we gifted this stuff, the more the meteorologists, and I pinpoint my favorite set of different meteorologists, the more that they would stumble over their talking points, and that what they were saying didn't actually reflect what was going on outside. And after about a year of gifting, I think it was with our first like official full summer, having had so much orgonite out there around Chicago, it was actually quite cold, and people were bitching that, where is summer? Because we were going on, I think, the 4th of July, and it was still, sweater weather.
Wow.
And so it wasn't enough, I think, at the time to just say like, this is the end all be all, and that this is all me, It wasn't that. It was, there is just another reason to keep doing this and to keep experimenting with it. And eventually, over what would have been, I think it was about 2.5 years solid, we were going out to the suburbs. We were going everywhere we could to get as much orgonite out there around the city of Chicago. And I remember, I think the last time I did any serious documentation there before we moved was November 2017. We moved in August of 2018, but in November, the foliage had not changed after Thanksgiving. And there was an article, I was reading the newspaper one morning, and it said, they were of course saying it was global warming, it was man-made climate change was the reason. Nothing had been turning yellow or red in the city. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I'm at the same time researching this stuff by Reich, talking about like basically extending the life cycle of plants.
Mm.
And I thought, I really started to question how much of reality is cyclical and a controlled cycle as well. So like I've actually, this is a bigger wormhole. I won't elaborate. I'll just simply say, I ponder whether or not we actually have 4 seasons in our realm, and if we do, how much of it is really on a timer that is controlled artificially by something.
Right.
Because the life cycles have, like around here in Arizona doing this work. I mean, and I am a Nazi with Orgonite gifting in Arizona. I am a kill it with fire mentality. And we last year and this year, instead of having a fall, we had a second spring. And this winter is definitely more wet than last winter, but it's like it is just, everything is saturated with water, and there is wildlife everywhere. The longer I live here, it's like there's rarely a day where there's not a bunch of bucks or doe in the yard. And it's like, that's not, because, and I ask all the people who've been, I mean, I live in a town of retirees who've lived here for the last 2 decades, and they're like, none of what's going on right now is normal, and they can't figure out what's happening.
So when you do the gifting, you said that you try to do it within like a city block of where the tower is. What do you do with the hockey puck? Do you bury it? Do you just throw it somewhere? Like, how do you put it on the earth?
Okay, so I will elaborate, and I will also say too, if people are curious that they want a huge overhaul tutorial of the tower busting process, there is a tutorial video on my website called Tower Busting 101, and that they can always hear anything I'm about to say, but in much more detail.
Great.
So there are essentially different tools with different rules, and that involves the 2 main tools that we use for tower busting are the tower buster and the earth pipe. And the earth pipe, as the name implies, it is called an earth pipe because it is buried in the earth. But a tower buster does not have to be buried. The tower buster is what I consider to be the universal gifting tool. It is the reason, with it being versatile, you don't have to put it under the ground. They can be easily disguised. They can be easily attached. When you start busting towers, or I think for certain purposes, maybe what we'll do is we'll just say, if you're going to gift Orgonite, so if you're going Orgonite gifting, and you're putting that gift out there in the world, there are ways you can, you're basically answering the question, how do I leave this device in this area where it will remain undisturbed for the longest amount of time possible?
Yes.
So to answer that question, then you get really creative really quickly. And I think a lot of this boils down to discernment and intuition and common sense. And so, for example, if we were going to go out, I might pinpoint a location I want to go to. I find stuff in the forests, whether I'm using Google Earth by accident or I'm on a cross-state journey doing something else or whatever. I visit a friend. Over time, it's like you will find where all the towers are because you've set out the intention. You want to find them. You don't even need a program or a computer to tell you where they are. You're going to find them. So once you find where they are, you decide like, okay, what can I do to leave this in that area? And one of the things I found, is like construction. I don't want to give too much information, but like when you find construction going on anywhere, you'd be shocked at what you can leave in a place that may end up getting encased within foundation or buildings and basically, fossilized till the demolition of that building in the future. So you can leave things in places or bury them in the ground where they are completely gone, out of sight, out of mind.
Yes.
In Chicago, I'll use a building example. One of the worst, I think two of the worst things Chicago has going for it are the Sears Tower and the John Hancock building. those are, first of all, the Hancock building is a trapezoid that, it's a pyramid,
Mm-hmm.
and they both have, their devil horn antenna on top. Now, I don't mean that biblically speaking, but there is energy. There's an energy bubble coming over those buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like, okay, I want to gift the Sears Tower, let's say, or whatever people call it now. I don't know who owns it, but it's like you can get creative with things like magnets, for example. We're working with a device that is made primarily out of metal. You can kind of do the math on that as far as where you can pick up what I'm putting down.
Mm-hmm.
But there are ways you can strategically leave something. You can stick it, you can hide it. Also, the benefit, I will say too, orgonite is something, if you ever want to test like the masses with this stuff, put it somewhere that there are just huge crowds of people and wait for somebody to find it, notice it, observe it, whatever. And it never happens. And it's the weirdest thing, because I would walk around the loop and I would find things that I had like certain newspaper dispensers. There are ways you can color orgonite. So I would color orgonite in ways that would match all of the things I ever wanted to attach them to, so that they looked like they were part of the contraption, whatever it was I was attaching it to.
That's great.
Black 5G poles. I don't want to give away too much, because obviously, like, people will be like, "Oh, don't tell them the secrets." They're gonna know the secrets. It doesn't really matter. But you can put things in places so out in the open,
Mm-hmm.
and you can't help but laugh that nobody notices it. And I would walk around the loop and I could see every day, and not that I left everything out in the open, but when you're walking by street after street after street and you've got these, like, for example, the black pucks that you guys have, imagine those sticking against the flat part of a electrical box or a pole, a 5G pole. Everything just starts to blend in, as they blend right in wherever you go or wherever you put them. And that's actually something you can use to your benefit, because the majority, it seems, of the majority, in my view, of this world is non-observant. They've either got their head down in the phone, or they're just, it's not on their wavelength.
Exactly.
And I think this stuff has a way of almost camouflaging itself. So
That's fantastic. Yeah, I was going to say, I think part of the benefit of the zombie apocalypse that we're experiencing right now is that so many people are just looking down. They're not really engaging with their environment. So I could see how you could put it out somewhere extremely obvious, and someone just wouldn't think to wonder what that thing is.
Exactly.
They would just assume that it was part of a electrical pole or something.
Yeah. This is a newer thing. We always, like I said, you get creative, you get very creative, and very quickly once you start playing this game. And some folks, I think, don't like that I call it a game, but in a way it is. It's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've learned, and it's the same, I mean, some of the comments I get from people are really encouraging and fun to read, because they're like, "Oh my God, Mitch, I did it. Here's what happened. You said this. This is what happened. You were right. And I can't stop laughing." And that's the thing, because it's so, like, for example, a very popular tool that I know of that other, like, I have a lot of friends that are busting towers and doing the gifting thing as well. And a lot of people are under the radar, and they choose to be, everyone chooses their level of engagement and the extremeness of that based on, some people can't open their mouths. I'm a very loud-mouthed person and have that freedom, I guess. But we talk about, like, get yourself a high-vis vest, and it's actually an invisibility cloak. And the irony is it's meant for you to be visible, and it has the exact opposite effect. And if you get yourself a clipboard, then you're definitely invisible, and nobody will look at you.
That's
so
ingenious.
It's like, go be a land surveyor. It's there are ways to have fun with it, and it really should be. It's something that it deserves a certain level of seriousness, just in like, give it the respect it deserves. Like, think about what it is you're doing when you're gifting Orgonite, why you would be doing it in the first place. But at the same time, take a breath and relax and know that like it should be liberating, it should
Exactly.
be fun. And it's when you see the results of what happens afterward, it's like, I think it's it's not good to I don't want to say it's like a drug, but in a way it's like you get the endorphin rush. It's definitely an endorphin rush.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Can you tell the wonderful folks listening where they may find you and your wonderful work and products online?
Yes. So my website is going to be the best central point for that, and that is theorgonedonor.com, and that's Orgone, not organ.
Here.
So it's ORGONEDONOR.com. And they can also find me on Instagram, and I also make an effort to say, if you do find me on Instagram, send me a message. I only approve people, so I do all kinds of things to minimize algorithms pinpointing me. And one of those things is my account is private, and I also, if I can't verify that a person is a human being on Instagram, then I kind of just set it aside. So if a person follows me and I haven't been able to figure out if you're human, just shoot me a quick note and say like, hey, and I just wanted to follow you and look at your stuff and all that. So I do a little bit of blogging. Now that it's the new year, I'll be jumping back in to some more, I would say, what I call my documentation. I encourage people to look at my Restore the Desert project. If they go to my website, at the top of the page, there's a tab that says Restore the Desert. And that's sort of like the show me the receipts and a chronological order, just all the work I've done specifically here in Arizona. And all my shenanigans with our outings and tower busting endeavors. But they can get a long form of that on the website. They can get the short form on Instagram. And then, if anybody wants to support my work, the best way, I have what I call my Matrix job, or what I do for my Matrix participation tokens. And then and it has nothing to do with this. And it's kind of a whole separate life in itself. But then I have this, which helps to fund all of this gifting, because it can get expensive, as anyone knows, and raw materials especially.
No shit.
It's a roller coaster. But so it's a great way if they want to support and get something for yourself, and then also take advantage of the tutorials too. I make sure I show people how to make different things. I have written instructions on things. I've got downloaded PDFs for building the really, really big stuff.
Cool.
And then I've got the videos for things like earth pipes and whatnot. So
Fantastic.
you can buy some, build some, however you want to get involved.
Is that a tower of bubble wrap behind you?
It is.
So
It was.
So I was going to ask you, do you work at Home Depot?
I'm very lucky. I was working remotely before it was cool. I still actually work for a company back in Chicago that
Fantastic.
Which back in the day gave me enough free time that I could, like I say, take 2-hour lunches to go gifting every day. And here it's a way I can keep going. So
fantastic.
Yeah.
So is your handle on Instagram Mitch the Orgone Donor as well?
I think. Oh gosh, I'm terrible. I think it's just the Orgone Donor.
Okay.
I think so too.
The Orgone Donor.
I could look it up.
Yeah, I think if I assume if you just typed in Orgone Donor, it would pop up.
Sure.
Cool.
So
awesome.
I think I just typed in Mitch and Orgone, and that's how I got you. But we'll put all of that in the episode notes. So
awesome.
Well, thank you, Mitch. Thank you for taking the time, and we definitely must do it again, because we barely just dipped into the questions that I had. So that you had too, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
We'll let you know when this goes live, and we should definitely do it a little further down the road. Once again.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Well, thank you both very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to the next one. So.
Yes.
Hey,
likewise.
and if you come to Kansas, let's do some cloud busting together.
Let's
do it.
You know what? If I end up in your neck of the woods, I will let you know ahead of time. I'm born and raised from Nebraska, not too far.
Yeah.
And so it's the Midwest is. Right now, you guys are in the heart of. I think were you guys having bomb cyclones, or were you having an atmospheric river? I can't keep up anymore. Who's got what? But
Neither of them
Did
ring a
they-
bell.
I think
so
it's
oblivious.
both, frankly, is
Yeah.
what it feels like.
Okay. I just know they were trying to seed ideas about, I think they said winter tornadoes. I'm like, oh, here we
What?
go.
Yeah.
That
just
sounds like fun to
nonsense.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything to spook. But yeah, I will
Exactly.
I will keep you posted when I end up in that neck of the woods.
Cool.
So,
Wonderful.
Fantastic. Always welcome.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, until next time, take care of yourself, and
Yes.
we'll be in touch.
Yes. Many
All right.
blessings.
You too. Thank you.
Well, that was as incredible and enjoyable as I thought that it would be.
Yeah, I really liked Mitch. Mitch is super cool. He has really great energy and feels like he's doing the work.
Yeah, a lot of people who get into, I consider what he's doing a form of activism. Sometimes they get an attitude about it and they get really bitter, and I'm thinking Mark Passio here.
This is why I said cloud busting.
Aha. Yeah, I meant chem busting in my trail. Anyway,
Yeah.
people can't see what you're referring to in my list of questions, but he seems very optimistic and very he's totally the man for the job, because he's all about it. He actually enjoys doing it, and he's not, carrying around this sack of woe.
Yeah, I felt a lightness that you don't feel from a lot of people that are in the conspiracy space. There's, a lot of heavy, dark energy when, I always circle back to that Joe Rogan episode with Alex Jones when, at another point he was talking to someone else. I think he was talking to the CIA agent, and he basically said, I told Alex that all this shit's made him crazy, that he's gone crazy. And I think that's easy to do. I think it's easy to go so far down into the darkness and feel like all of this is a foregone conclusion and that we're powerless and these people or these predators are going to win and that it's over. And, that's a very easy excuse to be a negative person, and to see someone like this who was a skeptic and then actually went out and started to do something proactive and saw results from that, immediately had results. I think that's something that you say, wow, okay, so it's not over.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you're making these devices, your intention is very, very important too, because this is all about frequency, and you sort of imbue whatever device that you're making, with whatever vibe that you're in, whatever frequency that you're on at the time that you produce it. So Mitch is the perfect person to do that, because I think his intentions are very pure and altruistic. But I remember when I first heard about Mitch, I heard him on, I think, the Higher Side Chats. And of course, the word orgone stuck out to me because I know what that is, because I've known about Wilhelm Reich for a long, long time. And I was so titillated by the whole discussion, because it was, again, as I mentioned during the conversation, these are issues that I felt were way out of my hands.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt very helpless about, and like, what the fuck could I possibly do about something like this? And I knew about Wilhelm Reich's cloud busting technology, and I never thought about applying something like that to this situation. And it was just such I don't know, it was very inspiring to be able to feel like you can do something about the situation, and it's completely in your hands, and you do it under the shadow of nightfall or whenever. No, I just like that whole idea of just it being in your own hands, very anarchic. Yeah. I think that's the best type of activism.
Well, and he said some very powerful things when he was talking about how part of the mesmerism is this idea that we are powerless. and that we can't do anything. And again, I think that's a mindset that people get into, and it's a laziness of just thinking, oh, the way, it's this very nihilistic way of perceiving the world, like, oh, the world's fucked, and I can't do anything because of these big corporations, and it's the presumption that humans are not energetic and they're not powerful and that they can't have an influence. And the only way you see influence is if the mainstream media, play some puff piece about someone who did something really great. But again, it makes it this kind of an anecdote, as opposed to, no, every single person on this planet has the ability to influence their environment. And we are energetic beings, and we do have the capacity to influence the energy around us. And I walked into it again with very much beginner's mind, like not knowing anything about Wilhelm Reich's work, or anything about cloud busting or chem busting, or affecting or influencing cell towers at all. And so I looked at it with this innocence. When you handed me that puck, I immediately took it and I put it on my body. So my instinct, my natural energetic instinct was, oh, I should be wearing this. This should be on me. Mm-hmm. And so I haven't taken it off or out of my hands since you handed it to me yesterday.
You sleep with it in your mouth, right? Which cuts down on the snoring. Now, were you done with your thought?
Sure.
Another anarchic element of this, too, is sure, you can go to Mitch's store and buy almost all the stuff that he was talking about, except for the power wand and I don't think he sells chem busters, but you can make all of this shit yourself. It's not like there's some exotic ingredients that you have to have shipped from Singapore or anything like that. All these things you can get, if not in your town, then in some Etsy store, somebody is selling this stuff. And it's very DIY, which I love. It's the punk rock ethic that I grew up, that I cut my teeth on.
I swear, just going into fucking Walmart, the land of the dead, and having people just walking, because I just abhor that store and the energy. And I could count on one hand how many times I'd ever been into a Walmart before I moved to Kansas. It's just not, I've never been, I was one of these haughty people that looked my nose down on Walmart, and, going into that store was like, oh, that's where, that's where they're doing the slave trade of babies, and God only knows what else is fucking going on in there. And just going in there today and it feeling like I had this inner light or this inner glow that was influencing people around me in a positive way was pretty amazing. And having people look up at me and say hello, and I've never had that experience in that environment like that. It was just freaky. So when he made that remark about human interaction changes, I was like, oh, okay, yes, I did experience that. And for those who are listening who didn't hear what we talked about in the second hour, we talked about Don and Carol Croft and the book that they wrote, The Life Etheric. We talked about Orgonite Austin, who is another person who is doing orgone work.
Orgonite Austin?
Yeah, Orgonite Austin is what
I totally missed
he
that
said.
one.
That was what the guy went by.
Huh.
His name was Orgonite Austin.
Interesting.
We talked about what what these devices are made of, which is an inorganic element and an organic element, which the inorganic element is resin. The organic element is metal. We talked about shungite, and he said a bandwidth reader would be something that you could use to actually see the influence of the orgone. He talked about transformers exploding. Why are you giggling over there, you weirdo? Power wand, the power wand, and he gave his information.
Yeah, that's not a secret. You don't need to be a Patreon member to get his information. No, not at all. Because we want you to hook up with Mitch.
Yeah, exactly.
And give him your energy and your money, or go to his website and figure out how to make these things yourself and explore and learn about them. And there's lots of videos about how to make them on YouTube. And yeah, just it's a great area to research. There's a whole world under the surface that you didn't know about these orgone gifters. And I can't wait to become one of them. What?
You said orgone, and I was thinking of like organs.
That's the play, the Orgone Donor, organ donor.
Yeah.
Did you catch what he did there?
I did it. I got it. I also like kind of, because you know me, I think everything is parasites. I think everything that's wrong with the world can be distilled down to parasites. I did like the fact that he mentioned a parasitic element to this, dark energy that we were talking about. So I'm going to look into Wilhelm Reich's book, Contact with Space. That sounds like an interesting read.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would like to start getting some of his books. I've never actually read any of his books. I would also like to get, his son wrote an autobiography about what it was like growing up with Wilhelm Reich. So that would be interesting. That's actually what Kate Bush's song Cloud Busting is about. It's from that book. She read that book and got inspired to make the video. And in the video, Donald Sutherland plays Wilhelm Reich, who looks nothing like Wilhelm Reich by any means.
But that's super cool.
Yeah, it is super cool that Kate Bush was on that. It doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, she's an outlier.
She's a magical being.
She's somebody who's always kind of swirled the surface of reality, and that's why she's not as famous as she should be.
Exactly.
God love her.
God love her.
Let's go power wand her house right now.
It sounds like a Halloween prank.
No, I see it more like a magical performance, like take the wand and like swirl it around her house.
Can we ride the power wand to where she lives in England?
I was thinking more just via Google Earth her, Google Earth charge her.
Okay, we've babbled enough.
Oh, sure.
Thank you all for listening. We love you.
We do.
We hope that you got something positive out of this. I don't know how you couldn't. If you didn't, you weren't listening.
Or you're dead inside. And that's okay too.
It's okay, yeah. NPCs can recover too. They need love also.
We love you for who you are.
Exactly.
And who you could be, what your potential is.
Yeah. And if you have any suggestions for guests, we get a good deal of our guests.
Yes.
Or suggestions from listeners or Patreon members. You can contact us at themeltpodcast@protonmail.com or
hunter-muse@protonmail.com. And I will email you back if you write me. Thank you very much to all the people who reach out to me, although one or two of you who do.
Better on break in between semesters.
Break. Yep, exactly. And I want to give a special shout out, even though they don't want us to mention them by name. I will mention them by initial, M and D. We love you so much, and we thank you for all of your suggestions. You two always give us really great rabbit holes to go down, and we just think you are two phenomenal humans, and we just want to send a special shout out to you, and you know who you are.
Put that in your bong and smoke it.
Don't do it.
Don't do the crime if you can't do the time. Anyway, all right.
Now
Take
we're
care.
really babbling.
Yes, exactly. We need to eat.
Yeah.
Thank you all for listening. And as always, there's fantastic things coming your way.
Yeah. Wildness. High strangeness.
All right. Take care, people.
Meow.
To hear the full-length version of this episode, get access to exclusive and early episodes, and participate in our monthly Zoom meetups for as little as $3 per month, just click the Patreon link in the episode notes or visit patreon.com/themeltpodcast. Contributing financially will help to make this podcast my full-time gig that I can devote more time to and allow me to create more content. Other ways of contributing would be giving us a favorable review or rating wherever you get your podcasts, subscribing to us on YouTube, spreading the word wherever you and your tribe congregate, or just by sending us your positive thoughts and intentions. In a quantumly intertwined and holographic multiverse, these also go a long way. Thank you.